Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us. Myself and Paul Kelly, ESBR Boxing, we are back. And as you always think when you see us together on the screen like this, we are back in preview mode, but we are previewing a very, very special fight today. A super fight, Paul. I'm sure you'll agree with me. It's taking place. It needs really no introduction, but I'm going to give it one in the Kingdom Arena, Iridia. Tyson Fury versus Oleksandr Usyk for every belt that's going in the heavyweight division. Paul, we don't need to give a tale of the tape. We don't need to talk about both men's records, both very, very familiar, obviously, to boxing fans globally. After a word, of how you're doing, and I hope, obviously, that you're very well. I'm going to get launched straight in with this question, Paul, straight in off the bat, as we like to do. And I'm going to ask you, it may seem obvious to some people, it may seem difficult for other people, but the question I'm asking you this way, Paul, is this. Would victory for either man, whoever prevails, be the best win on either of their resume?
Straight in, mate. Yeah, thanks for having me on. Enjoy our previews as always. And yeah, this is a big one, undisputed heavyweight class. And do you know what? To answer your question, mate, I think there's two ways you can answer this. I think the obvious answer is yes. Straight up, I'll say that. But that's because both undefeated, both together have all the marbles between them. You look at Fury, and a lot of people would consider him maybe before the Ngannou fight as the number one heavyweight in the world. His trilogy with Wilder, beating Klitschko as well, formerly. And a lot of people would have had maybe Joshua up there with Fury, but then obviously Usyk comes along and beats Joshua twice. So then you throw Usyk right up there, having been the undisputed champion down at cruiserweight. So I think in that sense, yes. I think a win for either man would be the other person's best victory. But then at the same time, you look at Fury, and when he beat Klitschko, you think, yeah, that was a Klitschko who had dominated for the best part of what, a decade at the top of the heavyweight division, and he just went to Germany, which was kind of Klitschko's backyard for fighting, and then despite getting a point deducted and everything, he kind of outboxed Klitschko and won. Then you look at Usyk and you think he came to the UK and beat Joshua first time around rather convincingly. He was an underdog in that fight. Obviously, boxing fans, we knew the threats Usyk posed to Joshua, but he was an underdog going into that fight. And like there was points there where you think he maybe could have stopped Joshua, and if there was a few another couple of rounds, he might well have done the first time around. Then he went and did it again in a closer fight in Saudi. So you're like, he has the wins over Joshua. Obviously, also has those run of victories at cruiserweight before in the World Boxing Super Series in everyone's backyard, then winning and becoming undefeated. So it's a really interesting question. I mean, I think I will go with yes. It is either man's best win, but you can kind of caveat that with what I've just said about Usyk's run at cruiserweight, the two Joshua wins, as well as Fury's Wilder trilogy, and obviously Klitschko at the time as well.
You know what, Paul? I agree with you actually in the sense that the obvious answer is yes, but I'm actually going to put a slight caveat and a slight disagreement here in the sense that, and I'm going to try and elaborate on this as quickly as possible as I can. I think for Usyk, beating Fury would be the number one name on his CV, frankly, just because the size of Fury, the fact that he's obviously a big heavyweight, contested at heavyweight, arguably to some people the best heavyweight currently in the world, depending on obviously that Ngannou performance, what's he got left, etc. All those things sort of swirling in the background may diminish your opinion in that respect. So I do think from Usyk it is the case. Fury is rough, a little bit more clouded because I look at like what you were saying about Klitschko, and you look at like how much of an underdog Fury was, the style that Fury had at that point, and he hadn't necessarily tested himself with anywhere like the challenge of Vladimir Klitschko. He was in Germany, like you say, dominated for 10 years in Klitschko's home, or his fighting home essentially at that point. That performance for me will always stand the test of time. Then I also look at even Wilder and go, look, don't get me wrong, Usyk's a fantastic boxer. Usyk would be the best actual boxer Fury would have beaten. But I look at the size of someone like Wilder, like one touch power, KO power, Fury coming back from that weight loss, whatever. And let's be honest as well. Like Wilder did touch him. He had him over numerous times over that trilogy, and he got back up. So it could have obviously been different. So for me, I almost feel like Usyk, without diminishing him, I think he's the best fighter. But I almost feel like he arguably would be the third for me in my head victory of Tyson Fury. But again, I'm not going to criticize anyone that says he's up there at one because again, he's such a superior boxer. But I just think the size and the sort of challenges that he presents are different to someone like Wilder. I don't think Usyk's going to be able to stop Fury one punch KO power in that respect. He's going to have to outbox him. Size difference, have to get inside and hit him regularly essentially in order to do that. So I see it being actually more of a mismatch than some of those other contests just because of the kind of size differences. But equally, the guy holds, 3 belts out of 4. So I could be talking. Yeah, let me know in the comments whether you think I'm talking rubbish or not, I suppose, is what to say about that one. Paul, another question. You mentioned him there in your summary, and you are a big fan, and you've obviously got the Under Armour t-shirt on now to obviously to taunt me here as well. But I feel like, also provoke this question, I'm not entirely sure. But we've seen obviously Anthony Joshua seems a good win out last time against Otto Wallin. Looked, with Ben Davison, looked destructive. Stopped Wallin obviously. Before that, there's still question marks on his sort of comeback post Usyk against Franklin was fairly underwhelming, and then even Helenius was fairly underwhelming until the stoppage. But considering that he seems to be resurgent somewhat again now, I want to ask you the question of. Firstly, let's take Usyk, older obviously than when he first fought Joshua. Joshua maybe tactically, if he changes his approach, obviously try to outbox Usyk in parts. If he changes that to try and blast through him, how do you think that fight would go? And secondly, Fury Joshua, how do you think that fight would go? Take it away, please, Paul. I'm going to give you the stage. Take it away, please, Paul.
Yeah, mate, it's an interesting one. I think it's definitely a question worth asking because of those points you've mentioned. You might sound, well, why are you talking about how would Joshua fare against Usyk? Usyk's already beat him twice. But, Ben Davison has had one fight with Joshua, and he looked destructive. Ben Davison himself has said, as a trainer and selfishly, he would love to get that back for Joshua. And you know what? I think a trilogy, depending on how Joshua performs against Ngannou, if Usyk was to beat Fury, a trilogy would make sense to a certain degree, even though Joshua has lost the first two. Um, and then, so yeah, I mean, I think tactically, if Joshua changes his tactics completely, like his two failed attempts against Usyk, if he goes in with the tactics that he fought against Wallin, albeit Usyk's a far better fighter than Otto Wallin, I think Joshua could beat Usyk with the age factor as well. Similarly, I've always said it, and I've never changed my tune, even when Joshua, some people would say, was in the doldrums at one stage. I've always said Anthony Joshua would beat Tyson Fury. So short and sweet, mate. I think Joshua stops Fury. If that fight were ever to happen.
Well, that's the tagline right there for this video. But I think, I've been the other way. I think Fury would beat Joshua still, but I also feel like that fight between Usyk and AJ would actually narrow if AJ decided to fight differently. With Usyk obviously being old as well, I think if he just tried to look, and don't get me wrong, Usyk's a great boxer to try and get out of the way, but I think if AJ just tried to actually stick it on him a bit more, tried to go down swinging, I think it'd actually be a closer fight than the other two have been. So I still maybe would have to pick Usyk just because obviously the two victories, but I think it'd be a closer fight. Paul, we're in that time now. I'm going to come back to you. I'm not going to do the chivalrous thing of answering my prediction first. I'm going to come straight to you, mate, and say, look, we are here obviously talking about Usyk Fury. We are talking about Saudi Arabia. We are talking about the 17th of February. Paul, who wins and how?
Yeah, thanks, mate. I think we might have different opinions on this. I did a video with Niall where we were in disagreement, and I'll give it away. I was on Team Usyk, making a case for him, and I'm going to do exactly the same here. I genuinely believe Oleksandr Usyk will beat Tyson Fury. How that happens at this moment in time, I'm leaning ever so slightly towards points. I'll go with I think it's maybe the safe bet on Usyk to win, on the judges' scorecards. However, it's worth noting, and write this down, folks, and come at me if I'm wrong or right in the aftermath or whatever. But it would not surprise me if Usyk stopped Fury late on. But at this moment in time, I'm going with an Usyk points victory.
Right, it says, Paul, I mean, no, fair play to you. I'm not going to criticise your passion there or your pick. I am going to disagree with it, though. And I think I'm going to pick Fury. I'm going to pick Fury on points. And the reason I'm going to do so is, again, I just think when Usyk gets in next to Fury, there's going to be a noticeable size difference. I can see Fury essentially jabbing and going backwards, or when he does go forwards, jab, jab, hit, hold. And I thought I've kind of struggled to see how Usyk's going to get inside Fury regularly enough to kind of, I think it'd be messy fight in some ways, technical, but quite messy. And I just struggle to see how he's going to do the sort of eye-catching inner work to kind of to prevail. That's my opinion. But I'm not going to criticize your opinion. But what I am going to say is we're going to have to leave it there. Guys, check out the rest of the channel. Obviously, we've got a lot of content coming up around this fight, frankly. We've got top victories from both fighters. We've got the debate that Paul was talking about with Niall there. Team Usyk checking in, obviously, over there on Paul Kelly. We've got other stuff, content with other channels, collaborations, etc., other further reviews and big fight breakdowns. Check those out. Paul, as always, an absolute joy to be joined by you today to break down this super fight. And as always, guys, a joy to be joined by you watching. Thank you very much.